So during this demo, I'm going to create a very simple iPhone app. Again, my name is Rafiq Wayani, if you don't know me. And I'm going to open up Xcode right here on my Mac. Now, Xcode is the platform that you use to create iPhone and iPad apps. And I'm going to create a very simple app. I'm going to take you around the Xcode interface, and I will show you how you can construct a very simple iPhone application using Xcode. If you're not familiar with the interface, I'll do my best to introduce it to you in a very simplistic manner. If at any time something I said, you don't understand something I said, just let me know and I will repeat it for you. What is by creating a new Xcode project. Okay. And it opens up this screen for me right here. Now this window is quite informative right here. I have the option of creating an iOS application, which is for mobile devices such as iPhone and iPad, or OS X application for Mac desktops, laptops, and such. So I'm creating an iOS application, and I have a few options. I can create a master detail application. And if I want to create a master detail application, it will allow me to construct a user interface that has a configuration controller, and it gives me the option of building a master detail form, if you will. In my case, I'm building something quite simple. I'm building a very, very simple single view application. A master detail application allows me to have multiple views. For example, in the Apple environment, when you're looking at your email on the iPhone, that is a master detail application where the master view presents you with your emails and the detail view presents you with a little bit of information about it. A page-based application allows me to navigate through pages of objects. An example of a page-based application in iPhone is the app that shows you your weather. You know how it shows you weather for multiple cities on the iPhone, and weather for each city is on one page. And I can go page by page and see the weather for those cities. That is an example of a page-based application. Then there is a single view application. A good example of a single view application in an iPhone is a calculator. Very simple single view that allows you to see everything on one screen. Single view. Calculator does not have multiple pages. Then you have a tabbed application. An example of a tabbed application on your iPhone is an application that shows you the clock or the world clock. On the bottom, you have tabs that shows you world clock and alarm and stopwatch and timer. And as you click on the tabs, different screens or views come up. And finally, there's an option to create a game. These are all templates that allow you to that present you with a starting point for building iOS applications. Now, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to create a single view application, and I'm going to click next. And now it asks me for the product name. Now, this may appear a little bit odd the way this thing is structured. I'm going to call the product some facts, and it's going to be IT Expert Webinars, and I'm going to say this is a interesting view. If you notice, I'm going to do com.it expert webinars. Now notice right here, It displays the build identifier in reverse form. If and when you decide to submit this application to the App Store, there are many applications on the App Store. This will help you uniquely identify your application. Maybe I'm going to call this some info. Or maybe I'm going to call it, notice how it changes, display some info. Okay. And the language I'm going to choose is going to be Swift. I can choose Objective-C, but Apple is moving from Objective-C to Swift. So I'm going to leave it at Swift, and I can choose what devices I want the app to be developed for. iOS is on iPhone and iPad. I'm developing this for the iPhone. I'm not using core data. Core data allows me to store some data right on my phone that I can interact with. It's kind of like a very simple database, if you will, right? But I'm not going to use that. I'm going to click next. When I click next, it asks me where I want to put this, right? I can say desktop, and I'm going to place this. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it iOS demo. I'm going to create the folder. I'm going to put it in there. Click create. And once I create it, here's the interface that I'm presented with. Let me take you around this interface. Okay. On top over here is the Xcode layout, which is the workspace toolbar. I'm presented with, in this particular instance, if I want to, this is the minimize, maximize, and close the window. This button right over here allows me to run my code. Okay. This allows me to run my code. This allows me to stop the code that I may have been running. This right here gives me the active scheme, and if I click on it, I'm presented with many different devices that I can select. And the devices that are available over here will depend on the version of the operating system I have installed and the version of Xcode I have installed. I'm coding this to meet the iPhone 6 device. Okay. Right over here is a status window, if you will. When I'm opening, closing, displaying when I'm compiling my code, this will be displayed, and right over here is going to tell me what's going on. On the right side over here, I'm presented with a standard editor window, a assistant editor window, and a version editor window, which you will see. And right here, I can hide or show the navigator. Look at it on the left. Okay, it allows me to show and hide the navigator. This right here allows me to show and hide the watch window and the console window on the bottom left and the bottom right over here. So I can hide that or show that. And this right over here allows me to show and hide, as you can see right over here, my utilities area. Okay. So if I hide all three of these things, I get maximum window in the middle that allows me to begin coding or use it for my purposes. Right? So that is the workspace toolbar. Then on the left over here, on the left over there, I've got myself my project. Here's what I called it. I called it display some info, and a folder for the project and files that come along with it. Okay, I've got a folder called display some info, which is my project. And I've got myself the Swift files, a main storyboard, which I will get to very soon. In the middle is my editor area. Right? And on the right, I'm presented with properties and attributes and controls that are relative to the editor area. For example, right now, it tells me exactly where it has stored my file relative to where I'm located on in my file system. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click, if you will, and I'm going to add right over here. I'm going to add, I can add files right to this particular window, as you can see. Right? I can add files, I can add folders. Right? And I can go over to View Controller Swift or Main Storyboard. Now, the main storyboard is coming up right now. It's taking a little bit of time. The main storyboard is the way that the iPhone is presented, if you will. If I just run this application as it stands right now without doing anything, right? Without doing anything, if I click on the play button without coding anything, you'll see very soon the iPhone 6 simulator will come up and it will present me with the interface, right down here. Here it is, a blank screen, right? This is representative of the iPhone 6. Okay, this is a simulator. And a way for me to stop this is by simply stopping the application. And that will stop the code, and I will need to go in here and kill the iOS simulator so I don't have many simulators running. Okay? I'm going to begin developing something. Okay? I'm going to develop a very, very basic application that's going to have a interface. Now, in my case, if I click on New Playground over here, and I'm going to select Playground, I'm going to call it Scratchpad. Because what I want to do is I want to show you how iOS works. Okay. So here, for example, is a way for me to do nothing more than to test my very simple code. Okay. And what I'm going to do is every time I enter code here, it will display me the result right on the right-hand side. This way, you'll get to see how the iOS environment behaves as I create variables and as I create consonants. This has imported a library called UIKit. And I have declared, well, it has declared a variable called str. And the str variable is displaying the result over here, the declaration of this variable. The result is displayed right here, hello playground. And that's what str has been assigned to. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say var first name Rafiq. Notice it says Rafiq. Var variable last name Wayani, and it displays me Wayani. Okay, right there. Var full name equals first name. Here's my first name plus last name. Okay, and it displays my first name and my last name. Okay, so I just assigned full name a value. If I want to declare consonants, I cannot change. When I say let, I am defining a consonant. I'm defining a constant var. Constants cannot be changed. Variables can be changed. So if I change the first name, to James, okay, it will change it. But if I try to say pi equals 2.99, notice it gives me this error telling me that cannot assign a value to let because pi is a constant, can't change constants. Here's something else that's interesting about Swift syntax. If I say var optional values and I declare that as a string, when I put a question mark there, that means that I can assign optional values a nil. Nil is the absence of a value, right? When I put that question mark, I'm saying that this particular variable may or may not contain a value, and it can contain a nil. So when I say, I want to expose the value, if I say optional values and I put in a bang, notice it will display me what the optional value is. If I say optional value equals nil, it assigns it a nil. If I don't put in the question mark, it will give me an error telling me that I cannot assign a nil value to that variable. So that question mark means that I can assign a nil value to that var. So Playground lets me, well, essentially play with my code and see how well things do or don't work so that I can begin coding. And that's a place for me to experiment with my code. All right. So what I'm going to do very simply, is I'm going to click over here and look right over here. I've got myself the size inspector over here. I'm able to manipulate the size of this associated with my code right over here. I've got the file inspector, so I can view the file and the file contents. I've got a attributes inspector that lets me take a look at attributes associated with my storyboard that I've got. I've got myself a class inspector that shows classes. So here's what I'm going to do. When I go over to the file inspector, okay, I am not going to use size classes. Okay. Notice it shrunk down what my window was, right? It made it a little bit smaller so that I can see. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, on the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to look for a label. And I'm going to drag and drop the label right over here. And I'm going to go to my attributes inspector, and I'm going to change this to some info, just like that. I'm going to take this, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, save it, run it, and I am able to view this. There you go. It displays, this is my project right now. It's not displaying here you go. Here's displaying some info, right? So that's the label that I just put up. All right, let me close out of this. Here's some info. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this, I'm holding down the control key and I am dragging it to the left, saying that I want it placed there. And I'm going to hold down the control key and drag this to the top. This is called spacing. So now it's going to be this much distance from the top and from the left. Let me run this again. And let's see how it displays now. All right. Some info. All right. See, more people are coming in. Hi, guys. Let me close out of this. Oops, not that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm able to go right over here to, on the bottom, as you can barely see here, I can resolve layout issues. I can update. I can resolve layout issues. I can reset to suggested constraints. Okay. This suggests me the constraints, and it basically positions that data exactly the way it thinks will fit. Right over here, I'm going to change this. Notice on the right-hand side, I'm going to make that 0. That will mean I want it to be unlimited number of lines. Okay. I don't want to limit how many lines this particular code can be. So there's my sum info. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to look for button. Take this button, I'm going to put it right here. and I'm going to call this button display a fact. All right. So there it is. There's my button, display a fact. Save this, run this, and I'll go on the bottom here, display a fact. This is a button, doesn't do anything, but I'm able to click it. Well, let me see if I can get this button to work. Now, in order to get this button to work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on the assistant editor right over here. See that show the assistant editor? So it brings up the assistant editor. I'm going to hide this right window. I'm going to hide the left window. Okay. I'm going to take this particular, I'm going to take that particular button, and I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to drag it right inside of here. And I'm going to say that this is going to be an action control, and I'm going to label it show a fact. Okay. And I'm going to say touch up inside, and I'm not going to send any parameters to it, and I'm going to click connect. Notice, show a fact. Right? And when I click on this button, I'm going to say I want to do print line. You pressed me. Close that. Print line will display it in my console window. Okay? I connected this button. This is called wiring it up. I connected this button to my code. In this case, this is the view controller code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this, and I'm going to see what happens. I've just written one line of code. Just running it right over here. And I want to display the debug window. And I want to open up this. Here we go. Now notice here on the bottom, can't see this. On the bottom left, see this? When I press this, see how it says you pressed me. So I know the button's working. Okay, so it's doing what I told it to do. Of course, still really not usable just yet, because I actually want to change this information right over here. Right? I essentially wanted to change the text over here. So I'm going to wire this up as well. I'm going to hold down the control key, drag this right over here, and this is going to be label some info, connect it. There it is. Okay. And then I'm going to say over here, instead of doing a print line, I'm going to say label some info dot text property, and I'm going to say this is some info. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run this. Go to the bottom, open this up. Okay. Display a fact. This is some info. Okay. So I'm getting some data printed on my screen that I told it to print. Let me close this. I want to do something else that's interesting as well. I want to add some more things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new file. Okay. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to add a Swift file. Click next. And I'm going to call this some data. Okay. Click create. So there I've got some data.swift. Now what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to create some data that I want to display. Right? And I'm going to create something simple. I want to show you how I'm going to do it. Very, very simply. So right over here, I'm going to create what's called a struct. Struct allows me to create what's called a collection, some data to display. And I'm going to have a constant in there. I'm going to say let some info equal, and I'm going to put in a bunch of items in this array, if you will. I'm going to put a bunch of items in this array. So the first item I'm going to put in there is sky is blue, comma, night is dark, real obvious things, right? Comma, some animals have 4 legs, right? Comma, humans have 2 legs, comma, vacations are awesome. And well, that's good enough. Okay? So I've got some data here. And what I want to do is I want to display this data. Okay? I want to display this data on my page, and I want to display it kind of randomly. So first I need to get it to display. So let me go back to my storyboard. Right? And over here, I'm going to, okay, I'm going to say, so here I said some data.swift. That's my little Swift class that I created. And right over here, I'm going to say let some data equal some data, some data to display. Come on. Okay. So now what this is going to do is it's going to access the structure, some data to display, right there. And it will give me access to all of it underneath the hood. Let's see how well this works. This function right over here, this overload function right over here, I'm going to state right over here that I want to grab some data. So the name of my label is some info. Here's my label called label some info. Say label some info dot text is going to equal some data, and I'm going to say some data of 0. Let's see how well that works. When I run this, I'm actually telling it to present me with the first element. Now here's telling me that, hey, some data to display, right? It's giving me a problem over here. So what I'm going to do here, right? What I'm going to do here is display my controller. And I'm going to store, go to some data, label it the same, save it, go right over here, call it some data, and save this, run this without changing anything. my var in lowercase. Now, Swift is case sensitive, okay? So uppercase, lowercase makes a difference. When I run this, right? When I run this, and okay, my data class, let me do this. Let me comment this out, and right over here, I'm going to go over to some data. I'm going to grab this, copy this, go over here, paste this. I've got my array listed right over here, some info. And right in here, I'm going to say label some info dot text is going to equal exactly what my element is. So there I'm going to display the first item. So it should display night is dark. Okay. The label should display night is dark. And let me run this and take a look. Right, there it is, night is dark. And the way it did that is it's displaying the first element. This is element 0, this is element 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. It's from 0 to 4, so there are a total of 5 elements in here. Let me go down over here, and I want this to display me the second fact. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say some info. Maybe I can just, this is going to just, when I click on the button, show a fact, it's going to display me the third item in the list. Watch. So it opens up with night is dark. When I click on this, it shows some animals have 4 legs. All right. Let me close this. Let me open this back up. And I want to do something that's interesting here. Instead of displaying 1s and 2, I wanted to pick a random number. Right? Instead of picking 1s and 2s, I want to pick a random number that it will use to display me my fact. So every time it will display me a different fact. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say right over here, let me go over to my scratch pad. And I'm going to try to display some very basic. Go back. Here. I'm going to try to display a random number. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say var random equals arc for random. This is a function, and I'm going to give it a value of 6. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. 5 items means that this has the upper limit of 6. It's going to give me a random number between 0 and 5. If I change this to random, right, and I run this, what's going to end up happening is every time I press the display a fact button, it should display me a different fact. Now this is saying that the subscript value, right, it can't change it from okay, with an index type of UN32, right? So here, right over here, this is int. All right, save that. and save that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var random number is going to be a random number between 0 and 5. Right? And what I'm going to do in my code is I'm going to cache this whole thing. And this is going to be an integer. Okay, casting it really means that I'm going to convert it so that it can be understood. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this and run this and watch what happens. Oh, stop that. Come on. Arc for random int. Let me split these lines up. They're going to be easier to understand if I split them up. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split it up into 3 different lines. All I want is to randomly display my text. So I'm going to do var unsigned array count equals unsigned integer 32. And I'm going to say that some info, some info, which is the label for my array right over here, some info, dot count. Then I'm going to do var unsigned random number is going to be arc4random, and this is going to be unsigned array count. Then I'm going to say var random number is going to equal the int of unsigned random number. All right. Then after I have split that up, I can actually say that random number. Save that. And let me run this. Let me open this up. So displays night is dark, and when I click on this, it changes, okay, between the various different ones, and it does it randomly. The reason for that is because this right over here is generating a random number every time. This right here is a var that has been declared as an unsigned integer, and it keeps the value of the number of elements that are in my array. My array contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements right now. If I add more to it, and I say New York is expensive, and I say coding is fun, and I say California is a state. Say Chicago is cold. Save this. Now what's going to end up happening is it's going to say that the value for this is going to change because I have added more elements to this. I have added Instead of 5, now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm just going to go up here. It's going to adjust this. It's going to adjust the array count, and it will display some data. So let me show you, and let me run this. Okay. My display. Click on display a fact, and it iterates through the different facts. Right? Okay,